I'd like to convene the Ways and Means Committee. I just told our vice chair, I said maybe I should just say on your mark, get ready, go, because I used to be a track coach, and he said, well, he used to be as well. So physically I looked a little bit different when I was in high school relative to things like track. We do have I guess I'll do it again. Wasn't sure that people knew we were starting. Yeah, we've. Thank you, those of you in the audience. We've convened the meeting. Again, for those of you in the audience, we've convened the meeting. Getting better. Thank you. I guess apparently the noise level was such people didn't realize we had convened. We do have the minutes from the previous meeting. Representative McNamara?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I will move the minutes from the Monday, April 8th meeting.
Okay, the motion is before us. Any discussion? Seeing none, then all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. The first bill up today is House File 729 by Representative Mahoney, the Omnibus Jobs and Economic Development Finance Bill. And just to map out very briefly the road we're on, this question I think came up at an earlier meeting. At least one of the committees I was on was aligning bills with the Senate, because we do have different committee structures. And so this will be our first run at it this session. We've done this kind of thing before. I remember when I was chair of the Finance Committee, we used to combine them to line up. And the process we used, we'll be using here this afternoon. We'll take the Mahoney bill up. He will explain the bill. And we'll take any amendments to that bill, and then we'll lay it over. And then we'll do the same thing with House File 1682, Representative Atkins' bill, the Omnibus Commerce and Consumer Protection Finance Bill. Discuss that bill, take any amendments, lay it over. And then we have Representative Clark's Omnibus Housing Finance Bill. The same thing, and then in the end, the vehicle that will actually leave committee that will amend the various articles onto will be House File 729 by Representative Mahoney. That will be the vehicle, and then the other two bills will just remain being laid over. So these will all be combined in the end into 729, and we'll deal with those series of motions later, but just so you know what the general roadmap is going to be. Representative Mahoney, are you ready to walk us through your bill?
Mr. Chair, I don't know what two amendments these are, but I'm going to move them.
Representative Mahoney, I couldn't hear what you said. You said something about amendments?
Mr. Chair, there was 3 amendments on the desk here.
Oh,
I just moved them over to the chair, whoever's
okay.
from the old past committee or whatever.
I thought you were talking about amendments on your bill. What I think we'll proceed with is,
why don't
if you could walk us through the bill, and then we'll take
correct.
amendments.
That'd be great. Mr. Chair, what I'll do is I'll walk you in the committee through, or should I move the bill first and then?
We should have a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'd move that House File 729 be laid over, be heard and laid over.
Recommended to pass at this point, and then we'll lay it over later.
Recommended to pass. Mr. Chair, I will walk through the bill. I'll use the sheet that should be in your packet, and I will tell you where the money comes from and goes. And then if there's any questions on policy, I don't know, I know you try not to do policy, but I'm certainly, it is a it's a finance and a policy bill combined, so.
And by the way, that's, for those of you in the audience, the way we operate here, because most of the things before us have been referred from other committees, is that if someone is in the audience, we view that as potential expertise if one of the committee members has a question of somebody that's in the audience as we move forward, so we'll operate the way we usually do. So Representative Mahoney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. On page 1 of the spreadsheet, it starts with, well, we'll go to line 4, business and community development. Certainly there is the direct appropriation base, which is this rent and heat and all the other stuff. The change items are Minnesota Investment Fund at $10 million a year for a total of $20 million. The line 9 and 10 are biomedical manufacturing facility, and what it is a carve-out of the Minnesota Investment Fund. The Minnesota Investment Fund is limited to $1 million per participant. This carves out and exempts this particular group or business and allows for a total over the biennium of $5 million if they so choose to move here. Line 11, the Minnesota Job Creation Fund is a total of $18.5 million over the biennium. Job Skills Partnership, we go above the base, $2.25 million. The Redevelopment Fund, and this is a change from the past where we have spent, we typically have done bonding money, we are doing cash, which means that small and mid-sized and urban redevelopment people can use this right away for many multiple different items, and that is the reason we went with cash. The Minnesota Film and TV Board, $1.9 million for the biennium. Enterprise Minnesota Growth Acceleration Program is $750,000 over the biennium. Southern and Southwestern Minnesota Initiative Foundation Pilot Program, which is geared towards minority business entrepreneurs in those 39 counties, is $400,000. Center for Rural Policy and Economic Development is $200,000. You will see on line 18 is the Business Development Competitive Grant Program, a total of $658 over base. But what that story doesn't tell is that this is really 20% above what the governor put into the base. I'm sorry, 30% over the base. So we have really increased this. These are the agencies that help small and mid-sized businesses grow in the state of Minnesota. Line 19 is refinancing, where we took one of the principles of this bill, and we started doing this about 12 years ago, is taking a lot of money out of the Workforce Development Fund. And that is really directed and meant to be directed towards unemployed people trying to get retrained. This bill is the start of cleaning that mess up that we've all participated in over the last 12 years and doing it with general funds rather than workforce development funds, which is spent on getting people jobs and training and jobs. And that's what line 19 is. That's refinancing of it. The total base at 27, the business and community total direct funding is for the biennium is $70,800,000, and the remediation account is $1.4 million. The remediation, which line is that in here? Oh, it's that line right there. Unemployment down at line 38 is the Unemployment Administration Contingency Account Transfer. It's $7.5 million a year, for a total of $15 million over the biennium, and we made that permanent. That is something we have done just about every year. Both sides of the aisle has voted to do that over the last, since 2001. But we've done it on a yearly basis. Now we're doing it in the tails also. Going down to line 48, adult workforce competitive grant refinancing. There again, we're taking out workforce development money and putting in general funds. That is a total of $1,996,000. The youth workforce development competitive grant is $1,140,000. In other words, that may sound like a little bit less, but that's the above and beyond what the governor did. Page 2, line 51, is the Fast Track program. The governor did not put that in. We, as a committee, chose to do that at $2.5 million a year ongoing. That is monies used to train the hardest of the hard to train and then get them a job. It's a continuum of services. They had in the 85 to 90% success rate with their participants. 52 is the Science Tech Experience. That is for internships at high-tech companies, and in the bill you'd see it's split 50% in the 9-county area and 50% in greater Minnesota for a total of $914,000 over the biennium. Foreign trained healthcare professional grants is $450,000 over the biennium. We have a special autism pilot program in Rochester at $68,000. Down on line 61 gets you to the total of workforce development direct totals of, for the biennium, it's $9.6 million in general funds and $19.2 in workforce development funds. For a total of $28,834,000 in all funds. Line 69, we have the workforce development. This is indeed, for this, the general support services, their general operating expense is $2,036,000. Then we have a base adjustment for $277,000. We have the annual cost of living study statewide in all 87 counties is $300,000 for the biennium. Labor market information study is $500,000 for the general support services. Total biennium expenditures is $3,113,000. Minnesota Trade Office, you have the base appropriation of $2,984,000 in the biennium. The expansion is $540,000, and that's to expand trade offices. We have one now. This is to try to expand it to a total of 4. State trade and export promotion grants for a total of $630,000 over the biennium, which helps small companies, small and mid-sized companies get ready to export overseas. The best dollars we can spend is helping companies export overseas, because that's money directly back to the state that we don't exchange. Line 85 is Invest Minnesota Marketing Initiative for $180,000 a year, or $360,000 for the biennium. That is to market Minnesota to the nation and to the world. We need to think worldwide. We need to think nationwide. And we're going to do that now. Trade Advisory Policy Group advises the House and Senate and Governor on trade policy set by the federal government, whether it's good for Minnesota or bad for Minnesota.
Representative Mahoney, Representative Nornis had a question. Did you want to go through the bill and then take questions, or
this is just?
I'm open to however you want to proceed. Representative Nornis.
Mr. Chair, basically just a fundamental question on reading this form. Representative Mahoney, I'm looking for a way to compare the current budget with your numbers, and whether it's an increase, decrease, or whatever. Is there any way to see that, to know whether we're? Do you understand my question?
Mr. Chair,
it doesn't show 2013.
I can certainly get that to you. I don't have that with me. What I can tell you is that in the last biennium we spent $110 million. In this biennium it's $154 million. So we are $44 million more, or 40% more in this budget than we spent in the last biennium.
Mr. Chair, just be more, I guess, clear if we knew.
Representative Norris.
And
Oh,
I'm going to
Mr.
ask, we do have the information here. I'll maybe ask Mr. Marks if he's willing to point out how you can track the
Okay.
information you're requesting in your
Okay.
question.
And, Mr. Chair, I think it would be helpful that the spreadsheets reflect current law. There's a couple columns missing on the spreadsheets here, so when Representative Mahoney gets done with his first through, if he could then go back and tell us what the differences are, which programs in which there's a difference.
Mr. Chair, members, the spreadsheet, the first line in each area says direct appropriation base. So, for example, on the first page, line 6 is the direct appropriation base. That is the forecast base for fiscal 14 and for fiscal 15 and 16 and 17, for that matter, in the business and community development area. And then, starting on line 7 through 19 are the changes to the base. So this doesn't have columns on that show the base, but the first line is the base, and then there are some additions or subtractions to it. And each set is grouped that way, where the first line is the base, and then there are the changes to the base.
Right, Mr. Chair. If you had the 12-13 numbers here, you would show what things were not being funded at all, or what, I mean, we don't have the picture of where we are now and where we're going in these spreadsheets.
Mr. Chair, Representative Holberg, the 12-13 appropriations would be a different set of numbers than the 14-15 base. So,
Mr.
and
Chair.
they are not, the 12-13 numbers are not on here. That's correct.
Mr. Chair, I fully understand the difference between a 14-15 base and where we are now in 12-13, but not having that on the spreadsheet doesn't give committee members a full picture of what's being proposed in these omnibus bills.
And Mr. Chair, to that point,
Just a moment. Representative Norris, were you done?
yes, thank you, Chair.
Okay. Yeah, now Representative Anderson. I just wanted to make sure he is finished.
thank you, Mr. Chair, and to Representative Holberg's point, I'm just wondering if we have a couple of more of the finance bills coming up here. In the meantime, if we could get those spreadsheets for those, that includes the 2012, 2013 data, because it really does help give you a better picture of where we're going and so forth.
Mr. Marks?
Mr. Chair, I'll check. I don't know if we can do that right now or not.
We'll do it if it's possible, and if it's not,
Mr. Chair.
just a moment. We're going to do some checking on that with the fiscal analysts.
And
Representative Holberg?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just, I know that for today's bills, it might be difficult, but hopefully as we move forward with other omnibus bills, the spreadsheets can reflect those as well.
I think the chief analyst is with us. You'll check into that for us, right, Mr. Marks?
Yes.
If it's possible. I assume it is. I know I had Mr. Marks did me, not a line by line, but I had the same question in terms of the bottom line and how the accounts were changing. So we will see what is possible and what's available, and with that, Representative Mahoney, if you want to continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we left off at line 92, which is the vocational rehabilitation. Those all stayed the same as what were proposed in the governor's budget. Did not make any changes to those. And if you go down to line 124, you get to that total dollar figure of $87,788,000 for the year, 174 million for the biennium. Department of Labor and Industry is the other division, other department in my division, starting on line 127, moving directly down to 133. The agency's operations, which come out of workforce development, workers' comp dollars, for the biennium is $20,956,000. Vinland grant is a grant to a rehabilitation facility that specializes in workers' comp issues. That is a $400,000 grant. And again, those numbers did not change. Down in line 143 or 144, the elevator industry employed regulated. What we did, just for a quick explanation, is we took, for many years, the elevator code has been in the electrical code. We lifted all that language directly with no changes and put it into statute in and of itself. We did increase a fee there on the elevator permits. There was a limit. We charged .015 for a permit from the total cost of the elevator. It was capped at you couldn't charge on anything more than, I think it's $67,000 for the cost of an elevator. What happened was that a lot of the small handicapped elevators kept subsidizing the 5, 10, 12-story buildings, so we raised that cap to $167,000, which then allows for those larger elevators to pay for themselves. Wind turbine inspection fee, that is a $27,000 cost, and that will be absorbed in the building code fund. And rather than dig through that, if people have questions about that, I'm happy to explain it, but I have a sheet that I actually have to follow on that to explain it, so I'll dig that out if someone asks a question about it. Page 4, we get into line 155, child labor safety and investigations. Unfortunately, we have to spend $300,000 because what we're finding is through the workers' comp records is that a lot of people under the age of 18 are getting hurt in jobs that they are not supposed to be performing. This is a cost to hire someone to actually go out and talk to the chambers, the associations, farmers, whomever, construction companies, to explain to them child labor laws. And sad to say we have to do that, but we do. 156 is the minimum wage inflator implementation. That is a $70,000 cost, and that will be ongoing in the base. That is contingent upon the passing of a minimum wage increase with a cost of living increase to it. That is the cost of actually figuring it and sending out the mailing. 157 is the JEEP bill, or Job-Based Education and Apprenticeship Program. It's a pilot program to do high precision manufacturing apprenticeships, 987. The all funds down at 167 is $5,065,000 for the biennium. Workplace safety, that's OSHA, is $8,308,000. And again, these are the same numbers these were government or budget numbers other than the ones up at 156 through 57, 157. General support, the workplace safety total appropriation, and then the base appropriation, workplace safety office. This is the labor and industry at $12 million on line 183. One of my favorite offices over at the Department of Labor and Industry is the Office of Combative Sports. That is a $248,000 cost generated by their fees. And what we did there, it looks like a fee increase, but what we did is we just got rid of the amateurs promoters and made everybody professionals. There is no amateur MMA anymore. They're all professionals, so we're going to charge them all as professionals. And I will say before anyone comments, it's not my favorite thing to do to regulate pretty much bare-fisted fights, but if we don't, we will have people die. And with these, we will have doctors and professional medical staff there to make sure that no one, the least amount of damage is done. Now on line 200, workers' compensation, workforce development. These are the direct appropriations or costs for doing the job we've asked them to do, and for a total of $46 million for the biennium. Going to line page 5, line 213, we are adding staff to the Board of Mediation, 2 people, 214, and that is a total of $382,000 a biennium, and it's got tails. 214 is case and document management system replacement. Some of their records are still paper records. They need to get into this century. Office of Collaboration and Dispute Resolution is a $512,000. This is it's basically a board of mediation for cities and townships and states and the state to use to keep out of the courts. We find that, well, the presentation was that they find, and documentation backs it up, that if people go through mediation, it costs less, and the cities, towns, and townships actually get to resolution rather than spending years in court. Bureau-based adjustment is an inflationary concern. Board of Accountancy that is a $960,000 for the direct appropriation. This is a fee increase on the Board of Accountancy. So there's $960 for the direct appropriation for base, and then the board operations and the base adjustment are $363 and $9,000 for a total appropriation of $1,332,000. The Board of Architecture, similar direct appropriation, change item in the base for a total appropriation of $1,561,000. Board of Cosmetology, similar again, base, board operations and base adjustment comes to a total of $2,715,000. Barbers, again, in the same fashion. You have your direct appropriation, the board operations, and the adjustment for a total of $640,000 over the biennium. Workers' Comp Court of Appeals at line 272 has a direct appropriation of $303.4 million, and the IT system one time and the upgrade in judge retirement payouts one time is $210,000 for a total of $3,616,000. Iron Range Resources, $99,410,000. It's essentially the taconite tax. It is a in and out for the state. I don't really do much with it other than waste a half an hour listening to them. Starting in line 291, actually 294, is the Minnesota Science and Technology Authority. We as a state decided we didn't need to fund that over multiple administrations, so I decided my bill and my legislation should come out of law, so we got rid of it. All agencies on page 7, starting at line 302, this is all agencies and accountants direct appropriations. You go down to 311, it's $234,910,000 for the biennium. Total Down to the next box, all agencies and account total general fund appropriations. That is part of the above. You come down to 325, the general fund revenues, starting at 328. The 2012 Minnesota Investment Fund flood bill cancellation is $7 million. The UI contingency account transfer is $7.5 million a year for a total of 15. There's River Center temporary loan forgiveness for $5 million. Accountancy fees at $474. Cosmetology fees $1.4. Barber fees is $62,000. Total general fund revenues of $18,936,000. I would just go directly to 344. Bill to the committee's general fund target. Our target was $135,176,000. This bill spends $135,176,000. We spent every dime creating a healthy economy for the state of Minnesota. The state of Minnesota has good tools in its toolbox. It's just that we've been underfunding it for a long time. I didn't do dramatically flashy things in this bill, members. I just funded things that were actually worked and have worked in the past and hopefully will work in the future. If there's any questions, I'm happy to stand for them, Mr. Chair.
Okay, now we do have a few amendments, but why don't we take a few questions now, and then we'll move to the amendments. Representative Simon, did I see your hand up? Oh, excuse me. Okay, Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Representative Mahoney, a couple of questions that I have for you. Can you tell me how many FTEs are added as part of your legislation that you have here?
Mr. Chair, Representative Anderson, no, I never totaled them up. Certainly get you that number if you'd like.
Mr. Chair,
Representative Anderson.
perhaps staff can help us. I don't know if Mr. Marks has that data. Anybody else have that data at all?
And then we also have the fiscal analyst here, right? Do either of you? Mr. Solberg, did you hear the question as to the number of FTEs?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I did, and I'm just trying to recall. The only one I could think of right now offhand is Bureau of Mediation Services, which the chair mentioned was 2 additional, and then there's all the Office of Dispute Resolution and Conflict Resolution. I think there might be a couple in cosmetology.
Child safety.
Yep. And there's also one position, a new initiative of the governor's for the child workplace safety. So I think that, just off the top of my head, that's what I could think of.
Sure.
Approximately 5, then.
5 or 6, I would think would be.
And Mr. Chair, if you could just verify those and send me an email with the FTEs. And Mr. Chair, the other question that I had was for Representative Mahoney. I noticed on the back you were talking about the different fees. Can you tell me how many fees are increased or brand new under your legislation?
Representative Mahoney.
Mr. Chair, Representative Anderson, I don't think there are any brand new fees, but
The
there
only one I could think of is, oh no, that would have been on the electrical
Soderberg?
before. Mr. Chairman, members Ron Soderberg, fiscal analyst. I think there's some increases.
There's a lot of
There's increases with the a lot of the boards, the accountants, the barbers, the cosmetologists, and likewise, I think that there is some restructuring in the elevator fees that is trying to, as explained by the department at least, was trying to make it so that it recaptured cost. The other one I think was previously in the electrical code for the elevators, and I'm just trying to recall. The only one I could think of that's big is the UI tax reduction of about $50 million, $350 million over the next couple of years.
So, Mr. Chair,
And
Representative Mahoney.
as I said, Mr. Soderberg covered the cosmetology and the accountancy and the barber. There are some in the restructuring of the plumbing board, plumbing fees. There's a restructuring of the elevator fee, and I explained that one. There are, and that, I believe, covers them, and mostly other than the elevator fee, they are, and fines in the cosmetology board. The accountancy board has not been raised in 22 years, so that was a fairly substantial increase that was brought to us by the accountancy board, and they cover the engineers and the architects. The plumbing restructuring fees, what we have structured in the plumbing fee now is based on the number of fixtures, and it goes up, plateaus for a significant number of fixtures. So if you put in 10, you're paying $300, and if you're putting in 100, you're paying $300, and then it goes up. And if you're putting in 301, it goes up fairly dramatically, and goes off plateauing again for another 25 or 50. What they've done with the plumbing restructuring is, rather than coming up and plateauing, coming up and plateauing, is they went on a direct angle going up. So if you put in 10, you pay $300. If you put in 11, you pay $325. If you put in 12, you pay $350. And if you're putting in 100, you pay the first $300 for the permit, then $2,500 because you're putting in 100 fixtures, and so on and so on. The elevator, as I said, I explained that one. The accountancy board, I don't have the numbers. I can look them up in the bill. The barber, they added 2 new abilities to take the test, and rather than pay the full fee for the test, if it's a retest, there's a new fee of, I think it's $10 to take the test a second time, rather than having to pay I think it's $85 without looking it up, to take the barber's test again, if you take within 4 years. The cosmetology one I'd have to look up in the bill, but it's primarily based on the fines. What they have found is that they're making an estimate on the fines, and they've substantially increased the fines because they had a problem with it, and they're trying to get people's attention at this particular point.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and this is probably more for fiscal staff. I'll be asking the same question for every finance bill that comes forward. So if it's possible to get the information on how much fees are increased for each finance bill, and then how many FTEs are added for each finance bill, it'll just help if I've got that in the ready. And that's all for now. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And I think Mr. Marks has made note of that, so he'll give that direction, I assume, to the analysts for the various committees. Any other questions? Representative Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Mahoney, if we can go back to the cosmetology fees and the accountancy fees, as I'm looking at the spreadsheet and the amount of money that's raised in the biennium, and then looking at the additional appropriation to those boards, it looks like you're raising more money than you're actually giving to the boards. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair.
Representative Mahoney.
Mr. Chair, Representative Holberg, you are correct. Most of those are fees. Most of that fee increase is based on fines and penalties. So that was the number they had to plug in. We're hoping that it's adjusted in 2 years dramatically lower. But if I have to look in the bill itself, but yes, most of those are based on fines. So yes, hopefully that will be coming to the general fund.
Well,
Representative Holbert.
Mr. Chair, Representative Mahoney, I don't know who they are that plugged a number, so if you could maybe let me know who they are in your answer. And then I think you said that the fees were in the Board of Cosmetology, but the Board of Accountancy, that, I think that went from $10 to $30, I think. And are there fees involved with that computation? And again, given the money raised and what goes to the board, what's the excess or the windfall to the general fund in these?
Mr. Chair.
Representative Mahoney.
Representative Holberg, you're correct. There was a substantial increase. They came to us and they did not want to have to come back every 2 years increasing their fees, so they asked to raise it substantially so that they wouldn't have to come back for 5 years. This is their estimation that they will have to come back in 5 years and ask for a increase in fees. So although I did question them relatively well, I've learned that sometimes when I question the accountants, I get more confused. But I took them at their word that they crunched their numbers, and this was the best way to handle their fee increases and not have to come back to the Capitol every 2 years.
And if I might, I'm still looking at for the windfill amount to the general fund. You have additional appropriations, but I believe your revenue raised exceeds that. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, let me take a look.
Soderberg is coming forward. Well, Representative Mahoney is looking there. Mr. Soderberg?
Mr. Chairman and members, the difference is $400,000 a year. So that means that the collections over what is being appropriated back is $400,000 a year, or $401,000, but $400,000 a year.
And that's the entire bill? Or-
That reflects the increases in fees that are being generated in the bill versus the amount of money being directly appropriated back to the three boards, and I think that was a question. So
Yeah, that's the cumulative numbers.
Yeah.
But
And so,
Representative Holberg.
thank you, Mr. Chair. And so if we look at your spreadsheet, on line 331, accountancy fees, you show a total of $474 for the biennium. And if you go back on to lines 225 to 230, I see a total of base operations and an adjustment of 372.
Right.
So
I'm talking about the difference between those throughout the three boards.
Mr. Chair, now I'm even more confused.
What I'm saying, Mr. Chairman, if you go to, let's just take the accountancy one since it's the first one. You'll see the base, and then you'll see the board operations is increasing by $363,000 over the biennium. That's a new appropriation, the change item. Then there's a base adjustment of 9, so together that's 372. And if you subtract that difference from the increase over the biennium of 474, that'd be a $102,000 difference. And if you did that for all the boards, the three boards, you'd find it to be about an $800,000 difference, or $400,000 a year.
Okay. And
Representative Holberg.
Mr. Chair, and so Representative Mahoney, how much of that then is fees that you think are maybe soft money in the future versus like penalties as opposed to registration fees that you could count on as a solid source of income?
Representative Mahoney.
Mr. Chair, I do not have that answer at this time. I'll certainly find it for you as best as I can, but off the cuff to come up with that particular one, I can't give it to you.
All right.
Representative Holberg.
So it looks like there's almost $1 million, $800,000 a biennium that people in the state of Minnesota that are providing services are paying for fees to the state, that money's going elsewhere in the budget. Is that a fair assessment?
Representative Mahoney?
Mr. Chair, as I stated earlier, as it was directed to me from the Cosmetology Board, and that's where most of these fees are, good, bad, or indifferent, being generated, although they are in the Accountancy Board and not so much in the Barber's Board, are coming from penalties. So for not following rules, yes, there may be $800,000. And that's the lion's share of it, as I am told and I understand it to be.
Well, Mr. Chair, I know at least 100,000 of it is not fees. That's the excess revenue you're collecting off of accountants that you're not giving to their board. So somebody's got to be able to figure out what's that actual penalty money versus cost of doing business money for people that are just trying to make an honest buck in the state of Minnesota. And at least some feel that every time they turn around, the state wants more money for them. And I'm hoping that the majority of it is actually going to support their industries or boards and not to pad general fund spending. Because that just wouldn't seem like a good way to be respectful of the small business in Minnesota. But
Mr. Chair?
Representative Mahoney?
Representative Holberg, there is a tremendous amount of money in this bill to help grow a healthy economy. I did not have to go looking to niche cosmetologists or accountants or anybody else to try and fund good economic development. I will get that particular information for you, or I will sit down with the Cosmetology Board and fiscal staff and see if we can find that number for you.
thank you, Mr. Chair. And your fiscal analyst just told us it was 800,000 of additional money that was being raised that wasn't appropriated to these groups. So I hope that maybe you can get your pencil a little sharper and maybe not have to raise fees so much on these business people in order to support their programs. But in looking at this document that was just passed out that shows the deed, it's kind of a 10,000-foot level, and it looks like the base appropriation for deed for the biennium was actually 78 million, and I think it's substantially higher in your bill. So can you kind of just, in general terms, tell us where these additional expenditures are going, the increases to the base funding?
All the deeds.
Mr. Chair?
Representative Mahoney?
Representative Holberg, I can go by fund. The Minnesota Investment Fund was $20 million. The Minnesota Job Creation Fund was $18.5. The expansion of the trade office was $540,000. The trade step grants was $630,000. The Invest Minnesota Marketing Initiative was $330,000. There was a base adjustment of $277,000. I'm trying to go through where the redevelopment account would be $5,580,000. Job Skills Partnership was an increase of $2.25 million. Film Board was $1.9 million. Enterprise Minnesota was $750,000. The South and Southwest Initiative Pilot Fund was $400,000. Center for Rural Policy was $200,000. Business Development Competitive Grant was $658,000 over the base. The Adult Workforce Competitive Grant Program was $1,096,000. Youth Workforce Development was $1,140,000. Fast Track was $5 million. The Science Tech Experience Internship Program was $914,000. Foreign Trained Healthcare Professionals was $450,000. Autism's pilot program was $68,000. Trade Policy Advisory Group was $100,000. Cost of Living Study was $300,000. Labor Market Information was $500,000. The apprenticeship program was $987,000, and the Office of Collaboration, no, that's in the Department of Labor and Industry. If you'd like, I can do the same for the Department of Labor and Industry funds.
Oh,
Representative Holberg.
Mr. Chair, I think at this point, we'll just probably have to wait to have more complete spreadsheets to have a better picture of the change items, and at this point, I think we'll just have to let it go.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Representative Mahoney, I was looking at the St. Paul River Center Arena, and you have in the bill that you are not going to have them repay their loan to the state for the construction of that for fiscal years 2014 and 2015. Is it your intent then to come back and exempt them for the remainder of the payments, or what is kind of your thought process going forward?
Representative Mahoney.
Mr. Chair, Representative Anderson, the bill is pretty clear. It's just a 2-year loan forgiveness. I have not plans for anything in the base at this particular time, nor do I foresee it in the future with my bill.
Representative Anderson.
And Mr. Chair and Representative Mahoney, the city currently charges a sales tax to anybody that consumes goods and whatnot in the city of St. Paul. In order to fund the repayment, are they going to be suspending the sales tax then, since they won't be required to repay the state in 2014 and 2015?
Representative Mahoney.
Mr. Chair, Representative Anderson, this is an economic development bill. I don't do taxes. I don't really know what they're going to do with that particular sales tax. You can certainly call the city, or I can, and find out for you.
Okay. Mr. Chair and Representative Mahoney, I would think that at a minimum they would suspend the sales tax, since that's what they're supposed to be using to fund this. But this provision in particular, I'm very opposed to. The citizens across the state of Minnesota are paying for the loan to the St. Paul River Center. They have a revenue source, which is their sales tax that they charge. On top of that, the governor has proposed increasing LGA, and I believe that the final tax bill will probably increase local government aid that the city of St. Paul receives. So I'm not quite sure why they would need this, why they would not need to continue paying back the state and all the other communities in the state of Minnesota that don't benefit from this. I would hope that you would certainly consider that before this piece of the bill moves forward.
Representative Mahoney. Is that it, Representative Anderson?
That's it.
Okay, any further discussion before we take up the amendments? Okay, we do have some amendments in our packets. The first one, Representative Mahoney, that's Amendment 729A31. Representative Mahoney, would you like to move the amendment and then explain what it is?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to move the 831 amendment. What this amendment does on page 41, line 6, it's a drafting error on the Department of Labor and Industries part. They actually forgot the ability for to collect money or require you to pay for your permit, for a plumbing permit. So unless this is added, you cannot collect a plumbing permit fee in the state of Minnesota.
Okay, the amendment is before us. Any discussion? Seeing none, then all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carried. We have now an amendment by Representative Gunther. That would be the A30 amendment.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the A30 amendment basically, page 95, delete section 33 and renumber the sections in sequence and correct the internal references, amending the title accordingly. And this does keep the dates up for the training as they are today.
And Representative Mahoney, any comments about the amendment?
Yes, Mr. Chair, this is a piece to the accountancy board. This was the accountancy board, and the accountancy fees were Representative Gunther's. I'm fine with it.
Okay, any further discussion? Seeing none, then all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. We now have the 729A33, or we'll just say the A33 amendment. Representative Atkins, I think that's yours.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'll offer the A33 amendment. And then I have a change that I would incorporate as part of my motion. And that is on page 3 to delete everything after line 12. And on page 4, delete lines 1 through 8. And I'd like to incorporate that, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, that'll be incorporated into your amendment, then. Representative Atkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As far as the A33 amendment, what it does with the change that I've made is recognize that there's certain entities that are engaging in lockout activities. And when it comes to unemployment insurance benefits, right now we have in Minnesota, if you unilaterally as an employee decide that you are going to quit, you are not eligible for unemployment benefits. If you are laid off, you are eligible for unemployment benefits to a limited degree, and with an end time. This would recognize that in the event of a unilateral decision by an employer to engage in a lockout, that the employee would be eligible to continue to collect unemployment insurance benefits through the length of the lockout, subject to and this is new language from what was passed in previous committees, but subject to a 3-year limitation, so 156 weeks of unemployment. That's all that the amendment does, and I'd appreciate members' support.
Any discussion on the amendment? Representative Gunther.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And the way I look at this is a company substantially changes the way they do business, and they want to change the contract accordingly, and the existing employees do not agree with that, and they have a lockout. The alternatives to having a lockout are simply to move to Dakotas, which are not too far away, and raise sugar beets just the way that Crystal Sugar does, or cease business if they can't afford to stay in business. So basically, those are the things that I'm afraid of with this bill. Is this might precipitate a good industry that's been here for an awful long time, that presently hires many good employees to simply pick up and go. And we have to worry about that with many businesses, but this one in particular would be relatively easy.
Any further discussion? Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Atkins, where is your bill at in the Senate right now?
Representative Atkins.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Anderson, it's on the floor in the House. It did not make deadline in the Senate.
Okay.
Representative Anderson.
And Mr. Chair and Representative Atkins, since it's dead in the Senate, why are we tacking this onto this bill right now?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Anderson, no bill is dead until I learned that. I've been here for a couple more sessions. My first term, I thought if a committee or if a bill did not meet deadlines in each body, it was dead. And then I learned that no bill is dead until the end of session.
But Mr. Chair and Representative Atkins, did it even receive a hearing in the Senate? I mean, what happened in the Senate on this bill?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Anderson, I'm aware that it has considerable support from a number of senators on, I believe, both sides of the aisle, is my understanding, but I don't believe that it was heard in committee.
It was so popular it wasn't heard in the Senate? I'm sorry.
Particularly unpopular, Representative Anderson, with a particular chair, I guess.
Okay. Well, thank you. Well, Representative Atkins, and I'm just curious, what we've gotten a handout here today. I'd be interested in kind of hearing a little bit more about what kind of, maybe staff can help me out. On the handout itself is talking about the unconstitutionality of this piece of legislation. I'm guessing that's probably why it didn't move forward in the Senate. And I'm just wondering if staff has looked at this and what kind of potential constitutionality questions that we might have to worry about if this continues to move forward.
And, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to address that question as well.
Actually, I asked staff, though. I think it would be good to get some nonpartisan comments on it.
By the
Mr.
way,
Chair, if I might finish my statement
Atkins.
before being interrupted by Representative Anderson, I'd appreciate that. There was considerable testimony with respect to that by staff and by others in Representative Mahoney, Chairman Mahoney's committee. So it did actually receive quite a bit of discussion over the New York telephone case and some of the concerns that are raised in this. So I'd be happy to, but I defer certainly to our staff.
The memo that was referenced, I guess they didn't put who it was from. It was requested by the Minnesota Chamber to be distributed. So that's somebody was interested in what the source of the memo was, just so everybody knows. Would you like to comment?
Mr. Chair and Representative Anderson, just to note that I'm just seeing the handout for the first time and haven't had an opportunity to review it with my colleagues.
Okay. And Mr. Chair,
Representative Anderson.
can you talk to me a little bit about what do we currently do for unemployment benefits? Do the folks that are locked out, they currently receive the traditional 26 weeks of unemployment benefits, correct?
Mr. Chair and Representative Anderson, I'm sorry, I don't know the specifics of this law area. Perhaps I see my colleague who does staff this area is coming to the table and possibly answer that.
Maybe you could identify yourself.
Mr. Chair and members of the committee, I'm Anita Newman from House Research, and if I understood and heard the question, in Minnesota, employees who are out of work as a result of a lockout are eligible for unemployment benefits, just the same as any other employee.
And
Representative Anderson.
And Mr. Chair and Ms. Newman, for how long?
For the regular, the 26 weeks, including any federal extensions or emergency or whatever, so they're treated as any other employee.
Okay. So we would, Mr. Chair, so we are looking to give a special clause then for these employees that no other unemployed person in the state of Minnesota is going to receive. And that's just more of a rhetorical comment, so thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Representative Anzel.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Atkins has a good idea here, and it's not an idea that has never been before the body. I can recall over the last 15 years, literally thousands of workers in my district coming to the legislature to ask for the identical provision that Representative Atkins is asking us to provide, and we did it on a fairly bipartisan basis. And none of these companies left to go to South Dakota or Mississippi or Japan or any place else. They simply hit a bump in the road and closed. Link Temco Vought in White Lakes, a mining company. Eveleth Taconite, a mining company. Hibbing Taconite. Ainsworth Lumber that made board for construction purposes, all came here and all asked, all of their workers, thousands of them, asked for a similar provision. And the legislature responded, and in 3 out of these 4 cases, these companies reopened and these workers were given a bridge so that they could stay in northern Minnesota and be prepared for the reopening of these plants. And lastly, the other part of Representative Atkins' proposal here that requires some clarity is he's not asking employers. Employers are not going to face any additional burden. It's the UI trust fund. It's the UI fund that's going to fund these additional benefits for these workers at Crystal Sugar who have been locked out. So this is really a very normal thing. It's a good thing, and it should be done.
Okay, Representative Holbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I just have a question about why we're even hearing this. By the chair's information, the bill went straight to the floor, so that would indicate that this doesn't have a fiscal impact. I was under the understanding that beyond technical amendments, that the amendments and Ways and Means needed to have a financial consideration, and I'm just wondering if that's changed now, or...
There's a fiscal note in the packet, if that's what you're asking.
No,
Should
well,
have one.
Mr. Chair, the base bill never came here. The bill that has this language that was sent to the
It
floor,
was sent to the floor.
it never came here.
yeah.
So,
But it does have fiscal implications.
We didn't actually, Mr. Chairman,
What's it before us?
we didn't, and my apologies, we didn't have a fiscal note until a few hours ago. I think it was either completed last night or this morning. And that's why we didn't make a visit here. It's actually, and I should be more correct, it's actually in rules because it had not met the Senate deadline. It's not technically on the floor, it's sitting in the Rules Committee.
Mr. Chair, so is it your intent to bring that bill back, or?
The one in the Rules Committee? No, my intent, if the committee acts favorably, is that this amendment would be a part of the omnibus bill and move forward. But we did request, that's why I was pointing out, a fiscal note to make sure that if it did have fiscal impacts, we would know what those fiscal impacts were.
Right, well,
It's one of those situations, as Representative Atkins pointed out, that the House met the House rules by re-referring it to the Rules Committee. The Senate, for whatever reason, and I've had no communications with them, it didn't meet the Senate deadline. This is a way of putting it up into a conference committee, quite frankly, so that there's an opportunity to continue the discussion to provide unemployment benefits for those workers that have been unemployed as a result of the lockout for a number of years. It's what we're doing, as was pointed out by the vice chair of the committee, is an issue that has periodically surfaced when we've had difficulties. Another one, I remember the debate on the House floor involved, it wasn't a lockout, but it was a long period of unemployment as a result of a Northwest Airlines strike. And so there have been other issues that have come before this body dealing with like situations where people have been unemployed for some period of time. And I think you put it well when you said it's a bridge. And that's what the intent was. And I, too, remember, I think many of those bills were bipartisan in the approach. So if that answers your question, Representative Holbert, we wanted to move it forward, and this is a way of doing that.
all right, Mr. Chair, we'd like a roll call on this amendment.
Roll call has been requested.
Mr. Chair,
Representative Mahoney.
because it's my bill, I'd like to add a few words to this.
We have some other questions. If you want to wrap up later, or do you want to add comment now? We've got 3 more people on the list.
Well, I will add comments later, but I'll just say that I'm awfully proud to have this put into my bill and carry it forward. But I've got a few other comments at a later time.
Okay, fine. Representative McNamara.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Atkins, we have done something similar to this in the past. In your bill, how will the unemployment benefits be paid for the people that collect them? Will they be in the traditional way that UI benefits are paid, that they'll be 125% experience rated against the employer that's affected?
Mr. Chairman and Representative McNamara, if I accurately heard what you said, yes, is the short answer. It comes out of as Representative Anseltz noted, it comes out of the UI Trust Fund, but it will impact the experience of the of the employer involved, and they would be at a maximum experience.
Representative McNamara.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Representative Atkins, is that how it was done in the past, or was it taken out of the gross of the UI fund where it was modeled across the entire population?
Mr. Chairman, Representative McNamara, I don't know with specificity of it's been done in the past a number of times. I believe in each case it was done in that fashion, but I would be happy to stand corrected if Ms. Newman or somebody on the staff happens to know different, but that is my understanding.
Okay. I'm curious, Mr. Chair, if all of the ones have always been done and charged back at 125% to the employer, and if they were done for the 156 weeks.
Mr. Chair.
No, excuse me.
Mr. Chair and Representative McNamara. I don't know about all of them, but in the cases that I know, there's the cost where they're socialized or go back through the regular UI tax system. And in a couple of instances, I think Representative Ansel may be able to help on this. On the Ainsworth, there was specific language on the chargeback on the employer. But
Representative McNamara.
If Representative Ansel can shed some light, I'd love to hear it.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I hope I can. In the case of Ainsworth and LTV, because they never came back, because they ended their businesses in Minnesota, I believe it was the full 156 weeks. But in the case of Hibbing Taconite and Evelyn Taconite, the word bridge is very applicable here because they did reopen, and the draw on the fund was of a shorter term.
Well, Mr. Chair and Representative Atkins, these are huge differences, and you need to go back and actually check the facts of the situation. And for those that don't know and need to know how the unemployment insurance works, you pay 125% of the charges against the people that collect unemployment when they work for you. So generally speaking, it doesn't make sense for you to lay people off because you're going to pay more than they collect unless you reach a maximum, and there's a maximum level. And Representative Ansel has talked about a couple of firms. Actually, when you go out of business or you change, you no longer are there to pay the bills.
Thank you.
So who pays the bill are all the other people in the state. In this case, Representative Atkins is proposing, and Representative Ansel, I'm not aware of anyone that's ever collected it for 156 weeks. I could be wrong. I believe in the current model that the federal government has taken on, that there's people that collected for in close to that neighborhood. I think that's unprecedented in this country's history. And this would go along those lines. These would be on the backs of those employers 100%. I don't know if that's been done before, Representative Atkins, and this is very troubling, and I would like to know, one, would this actually apply to National Hockey League players?
Do you have an answer to that, Representative Atkins?
Mr. Chair, Representative McNamara, I honestly don't know if it would apply to the National Hockey League players per se or not. I don't believe that any of them sought unemployment insurance benefits, but during the course of that lockout. But I'd be interested if Ms. Newman happened to know.
Well, Mr. Chair, thank you. And Representative Atkins, I certainly hope if you intend to move forward with this really bad idea, that you would consider the fact that there are people that make an unbelievable lot of money, and I don't think the hardworking Minnesotans would want to be paying for $99 million contract people who actually, I believe, are Minnesota residents. I'm not sure they could be Florida residents because of the economic advantage to them. Representative Atkins, I'm curious, we have businesses in this state that have operations in bordering states. Do any other of the bordering states have this kind of language that would make us at least compete on a level playing field?
Representative Atkins.
Mr. Chairman, Representative McNamara, I don't believe that other states have these sorts of protections for employees who are locked out, but there is an ongoing case in North Dakota because it's my understanding that in the particular situation, and this isn't solely addressed towards that particular case that's been referenced with the American Crystal Sugar, but that they apparently tried to get benefits there and were unable to. The courts found that they were entitled to unemployment insurance benefits, and apparently American Crystal Sugar is still fighting that case. They don't want to pay benefits at all in North Dakota, and so this would certainly be a greater benefit than what's being done in North Dakota currently, or at least what American Crystal Sugar is willing to do in North Dakota in spite of what the courts are saying.
And thank you, Mr. Chair. And Representative Atkins, just so other people know what you're talking about, locked out employees in Minnesota actually did collect 26 weeks of unemployment. They were eligible. Am I correct in that?
Representative Atkins.
Mr. Chairman, Representative McNamara, to the extent that they applied, they would have been eligible for 26 weeks. Yes.
Yeah. And Representative Atkins, you're absolutely, thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Atkins, you're absolutely right. If someone doesn't apply for the benefits, we don't pay them benefits. They need to apply for them. And in Minnesota, if you applied under this situation for under current law, you get 26 weeks of benefits. North Dakota doesn't pay any, you're right, currently. So where we already have a competitive disadvantage with our bordering states, but arguably a good one. It's a tough situation to be put in, and it does protect people for 6 months. I would ask, Mr. Chair, that if we go forward, that we do know the actual, when this has been used before. Representative Atkins, if you do intend to bring this to the floor, I hope you're prepared to answer. Those companies that did do this, where we in a bipartisan way reached out to allow people to collect those benefits, who actually ended up paying them? Was it the companies that we actually dealt with, or was the whole state of Minnesota responsible in any of those cases? So, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Mahoney.
Yes, Mr. Chair, and Representative Atkins and Representative McNamara, the North Dakota Supreme Court refused to take up Crystal Sugar's appeal, and the North Dakota workers will get unemployment compensation.
Do we have
Small victory for labor.
Representative Davids?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is extremely troubling when we have a major controversial issue. I hope we're not setting a new normal here. I mean, 3 years, what a disincentive to work. I mean, just get locked out, hang around for 3 years, and call it a day. This is a major, major power shift in the negotiating process being done on the fly in Ways and Means Committee with no testimony. I think we need to hear from some witnesses here. I'd like to call down, if there's any representatives from the Business Partnership or the Chamber or the NFIB. This is very troubling, Mr. Chairman, very frightening that we can take a major, major bill, turn it into an amendment, and ram it through. This is, I'm extremely concerned about this. Is the new normal that this is how we do it around here in Ways and Means Committee? As a rule, you don't take controversial amendments because there's really no chance for anybody to testify with supporting it or with concerns. Has this been through the labor committees? Has this been through, I know it's on the House floor over here, but is this, Mr. Chairman, I guess the question is to you, is it your intentions to take the very troubling, controversial amendments and put them on bills in Ways and Means Committee? Is that the new normal?
Representative Davids, I don't know if you were here, but Representative Atkins traced the history of the bill. The bill was heard in committee. It was reported out onto, or re-referred, excuse me, it's not on the House floor. There was a correction made on that. It was re-referred to the Rules Committee due to deadline requirements, but the appropriate committee did have a hearing on it. It was referred to Rules. So it's not a new issue in that regard. At that point in time, the reason it wasn't initially re-referred here was that there was not a fiscal note. We did, once the amendment surfaced, we did request a fiscal note. We did get the fiscal note today, but it's not like we're picking up a new issue. On the question of testimony, I've always had the policy that if a member of the committee has a question of a person that is present that can provide some expertise, we're open to that. So if you have a specific question of any of the groups that you mentioned, they're perfectly free to address the question that you might have.
Well, Mr. Chairman, thank you for that, but I really don't like the road we're going down here with the Ways and Means Committee. This is the Ways and Means Committee. This isn't the Soybean Subcommittee. And we have a new issue here for several members. I would venture to guess that many members in this committee have not heard this issue in any committees. Representative Detmer, I don't think has heard this issue. Other members have not heard this issue, and to put a major amendment on in Ways and Means Committee is extremely troubling to me, and it should be for every member, Republican or Democrat, on this committee. I don't really think we want to go down this route.
Okay, Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering if we could have Deed comment, though, on this. I think I saw, and I'm going to not say his name correctly, Mr. Kalugiri from Deed to come down and speak to, if we put this amendment in place, what does this mean to the UI Trust Fund? Tax cuts that are part of this bill, how long does it extend actually giving relief to the businesses that will be required to pay for these benefits at 156 weeks compared to the traditional 26 weeks?
Mr. Chair, this is Mr. Caligiuri from the Iron Range.
Thank you. Mr. Caligiuri, welcome. And if did you hear the request? If you wanted Representative Anderson, did you have a question then?
I do. If you, Mr. Caligiuri, if you could explain if this amendment goes on, what impact does it have on giving tax relief to the businesses that pay into the UI Trust Fund? Because as we have it now, we're trying to give them relief. How much does it lengthen, increase the threshold for that tax relief to actually take place?
Mr. Caligiuri.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, for the record, my name is Rick Caligiuri. I'm Director of Unemployment Insurance at Deed. And this bill, again, provides extra unemployment benefits for individuals who are lockout for an extra period of 3 years beyond the standard unemployment insurance that most applicants are eligible for, and whatever federal extensions are in place as well. And the cost, basically, similar to most other charges against the fund, go against the employer's experience rating, and anything that goes beyond what they actually pay in, the costs then are socialized to the other employers.
Representative Anderson.
And Mr. Chair, my question for Mr. Caligiuri is, in order for tax relief to be received by the businesses that pay into the UI Trust Fund, you have to reach a certain level within the trust fund. So can you tell me how long this will delay us reaching that level in the trust fund in order to give relief to businesses?
Mr. Caligiuri.
Mr. Chair, members, we have not made that calculation. I don't have that information. We would have to go back and...
And Mr. Chair.
Representative Anderson.
Mr. Caligiuri, it is correct to assume that this will delay the triggering of that tax relief to businesses that pay into the UI Trust Fund.
Mr. Caligiuri.
Mr. Chair, members, I'm not sure that it will.
And Mr. Caligiuri, Mr. Chair. Mr. Caligiuri, though, when you have to have businesses pay out, when you're taking out of the UI Trust Fund, that takes it longer for it to reach the trigger level for relief to take place. Is that correct?
Mr. Caligiuri.
Mr. Chair, members, that is correct.
Okay, so it is safe to assume that if you are going to give out 156 weeks of unemployment benefits, you are going to be lengthening the time within which businesses can actually access any relief from the UI Trust Fund. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just want to make sure.
Mr. Chair, if I might ask a question of Mr. Caligiuri.
You're a member of the committee. Go right ahead.
Calgery, 1,000 people are taking advantage of this particular program for a year. What kind of a dent would 1 year of 1,000 people collecting the unemployment make in the fund? As I understand, the fund is $800 to $900 million.
Mr. Calgery.
Mr. Chair, members, I would have to actually do the calculations based on the number of potential applicants that would be drawing. The two thresholds that need to be reached in order to achieve the tax relief would be 800 and 900 million respectively, and at the end of September in 2013 and 2014. And I am not sure that the benefit payouts from this particular provision would prevent the trust fund from reaching those thresholds. I would have to do the calculations.
Your Representative Holberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's my understanding that there might be concerns about how this policy would interact with national fair labor standards. If this is an area that you have some knowledge, could you comment on that concern?
Calgery.
Mr. Chair, members, I'm not an attorney and I cannot comment on that particular area.
Well, Mr. Chair,
Representative Holberg.
I'm not asking as an attorney. I understand your title is that you direct the Unemployment Insurance Division for the department. Is that correct?
Mr. Calgery.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, yes, I am the director of the program. On that specific legal issue, I would defer to counsel on that as far as the legal precedent.
All right, thank you.
Representative Mahoney, you indicated you wanted to make a wrap-up question.
I had, it's a good thing that I could not make my comments at the time because I have held in check some of my stronger comments to this particular amendment in support of this particular amendment. I will say this. It has become the weapon of choice by employers to declare a lockout and keep employees from working and negotiating. It is a simple method of employers not negotiating. I strongly support the idea of trying to level the playing field for working people and businesses, and I certainly hope that this amendment goes on to this bill and move it forward.
Okay, thank you. Roll call has been requested.
Carlson.
Aye.
Abler. Anderson, S.
No.
Anzel.
Yes.
Atkins.
Yes.
Beard. Reinhardt.
Yes.
Clark.
Yes.
Davids.
No.
Dabney.
Aye.
Dean.
No.
Detmer.
No.
Gunther.
No.
Ackbarth.
No.
Hausman.
Yes.
Hillstrom.
Yes.
Holberg.
No.
Hornstein.
Yes.
Huntley excused. Khan excused. Linchewski excused. Loon.
No.
Mahoney.
Aye.
Mariani.
Yes.
Markwart.
Yes.
McNamara.
No.
Mullery.
Aye.
Nornis.
No.
Paymar. Plowski. Poppy.
No.
Simon excused and Wagenius excused. Oh, Simon.
Yes.
Wagenius excused. Woodward. Paymar.
Aye.
agreeable today.
Okay, the motion prevails, 15 ayes and 11 nays. We do have another amendment, or no, that was it. Yeah, I just didn't get it checked off. So, okay, this bill then will be laid over as amended, and it will be added then, or other amendment or other bills will be added to this bill later in the meeting. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, committee members.
Next bill before us then is Representative Atkins' bill. Oh, 1642 we're taking next? Okay. 82. Okay, 1680, yeah, 1682, Representative Atkins' bill, yeah.
No, he's laying it over.
Oh, okay, Representative Atkins.
Trying to get a hold of me.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for your patience. We were, Representative Holberg and others asked to have years 12 and 13 in the spreadsheet, and our fiscal staff has been able to accommodate that request. So there is a new spreadsheet that will be passed out. I would move House File 1682, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, the motion is before us that House File 1682, the first engrossment, be recommended to pass and placed on the general register.
Thank you,
Could
Mr.
explain the
Chairman.
bill?
And to the bill, and there will be a couple of authors' amendments that I may allude to as we go through this, Mr. Chairman, but this walkthrough is going to be solely to the bill as it stands right now. First off, I think the spreadsheet speaks for itself in terms of the summary of the appropriations. We've got within the Commerce Committee now, and something of a new approach. The Commerce Committee has some finance elements applicable to the Department of Commerce, the PUC, the Gambling Control Board, the Racing Commission, the State Lottery, Explore Minnesota Tourism, and then the problem gambling appropriation for Representative Sawatsky. Most of those, as members know, at least the more experienced members, many of those do not have a whole lot of moving parts relative to the general fund. They're fee-based. That doesn't mean that they don't undergo a similar amount of scrutiny. It's just that in terms of the bottom line impact on the general fund, it's considerably less than most of the other accounts. In each of the areas that I described, there is a 1% base adjustment within the Department of Commerce. Specifically, there's a few additional changes that people haven't seen in previous Commerce Department budgets. One is an additional $25,000 in the world of unclaimed property. You may remember, Mr. Chairman, that in the old days you used to pick up the Star Tribune or the Pioneer Press and you'd see that long list of unclaimed property. The department has started a program where they do most of, or all of it, I believe, now is online. And there was some concern raised by members on both sides of the aisle about the fact that, believe it or not, there are still some people who actually read a newspaper rather than just look online for unclaimed property. And so we've asked the department, I know it's not a huge amount of money, but it was kind of a key piece to spend a little bit of money on the news ads or the print ads, and then report back to us in terms of which one has greater impact. Another notable change is the Office of Broadband Development. That is funded with $500,000 in year one and an additional $500,000 in year two. To try to, in some, and there's a great amount of detail that the department can provide or I can provide, but to try to serve those underserved populations as well as the unserved populations Many folks have now realized that broadband isn't just a matter of being able to surf the internet as much as it's about business, and particularly in greater Minnesota. If you're going to be able to truly operate a business and do it well, there's a lot of our small business folks in greater Minnesota that need to have broadband access and have it be reasonably priced and of a good speed. So that's the chief aim of the Broadband Development Office. There's a couple of amendments, Mr. Chair, with respect to the deaf, blind, and hard of hearing that I'll talk about when the amendment comes up, and also with respect to Representative Hillstrom's bullion bill, and that's a separate amendment. Everything else in terms of the Public Utilities Commission, Gambling Control Board, Racing Commission, and those three items is simply the base adjustment, the 1% base adjustment. The state lottery, as most members know, is a little bit more of an entrepreneurial venture, and you see them reflected in the spreadsheet. Explore Minnesota Tourism. When we took all of our budgets, Mr. Chairman, and put them all together, at the end of the day, we still had $5.3 million left on the bottom line. We opted as a committee to put that towards Explore Minnesota Tourism. The reason we opted to do that isn't because we just like our state and love all the tourism opportunities, but because there was credible testimony accepted by both sides of the aisle about the fact that there's about a 7-to-1 return, or even 8-to-1 return for every dollar that you spend on tourism in terms of the impact on state and local taxes. Not just indirect impact, but literally direct impact in terms of state and local taxes that are generated as a result of that investment. So that's where we took the funds that were left on the bottom line. The final piece I alluded to, as I spoke of earlier, Representative Sawatsky had a appropriation for problem gambling. That's $225,000 each year. The Article 2 section of the bill, there is a fee change to insurance agents, and I see that Representative Davids has already walked out of the room, probably in protest of that fee change. We didn't get a lot of pushback on that. That's a fee change that hasn't, it's going from $10 to $30. Hasn't been changed, I believe, in about at least a decade or 2 decades. We've got Representative Johnson's policy language with respect to the you recall earlier in terms of the funding, I talked about the Office of Broadband Development. These are some of the policy elements of that. There is a change in the Commerce Petroleum Inspection Fee from 81 cents to 89 cents. Representative Dabney's contract for deed language, which was non-controversial, had bipartisan support, is contained in Section 7 through 10 and 13. And finally, there's Section 11, which is a technical clarification for the Department of Commerce's UCP division funding. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to stand for questions that folks have. Otherwise, I believe we've got just the two, I think it's 2 amendments in your packet.
What we did last time was we took a few questions and then we took up the amendments. So, Representative Hamer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Atkins, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding, making sure that a problem that I thought I was resolving didn't get relative to the auto theft prevention fund. Didn't. Is that still within this budget?
Mr. Chairman, and I do have our fiscal staff was kind enough. She prepared a new spreadsheet, which I think just adds 2012 and 13 as were requested, but no, we did not make any further changes with respect to that.
Mr. Chair, where is it? What line is that?
You mean in terms of the auto insurance theft prevention account?
Would that show up on the spreadsheet or no?
I don't believe that. I think that shows up as part of the overall number, Representative Paymark. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I should be going through the chair, but I believe it's reflected in terms of. I believe it would be in the. But it's within the Department of Commerce's budget. I'm looking for the specific, it won't have a specific line to it, though, Representative Paymar?
Okay, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to, because there was some confusion, and when I had a bill in front of you, and I just wanted to make sure we weren't losing the fund or its purpose.
And Mr. Chairman, Representative Paymar, I was going to guess, and I would have been right, but I then had a friend show up from the fiscal staff. It is within line 19 and 20. You'll see the enforcement market assurance. Actually, it's line 19. It is part of that 5 point. Well, and you see it walk across the 3.495. It's a portion of their budget.
Very good. Thank you.
Any other questions before we go to amendments? Okay, Representative Atkins, you have an amendment?
I do, Mr. Chairman. The A8 amendment adds, Mr. Chairman, first I would offer the A8 amendment.
Okay, motion is before us. Representative Atkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This does a change with respect to the deaf, blind, and hard of hearing account. It adds, currently in the bill, there's $300,000 in year one and $300,000 in year two. This would add another $500,000 in year one and an additional $800,000 in year two. The reason why it's being considered in this committee, Mr. Chairman, is because I didn't feel comfortable. We raised the money through the TAM fee in the Commerce Department, but the money is then spent in a variety of other areas, from health and judiciary and a whole number of other areas. And rather than take sole control in the Commerce budget for making that change, I felt more comfortable having that before this body. My understanding is that Ms. Hartnett, on behalf of the Commission, has visited with at least most. I think she was down to just 4 members yesterday and had visited with most of the key members that had money being spent within their policy area or finance area, and had not experienced any objection to this amendment and to the increase in funding. We can have her, if you like, Mr. Chairman, if people have specific questions about how the money would be allocated. But she has come to me with, and I hope perhaps other members that had an interest, with a detailed description in terms of how that money would be spent, most of which will go for interpretation services, so that aiding people who are afflicted with deaf or blindness, with the ability to, or deaf, blind, and hard of hearing, to be able to communicate effectively in a variety of forums.
And by the way, the handout that members just received comes from the, just in case it's not clear, the Commission of Deaf, Blind, and Hard of Hearing. So this handout, I think, was probably being given out prior to the meeting as well, but they requested it be distributed at this point. So that may answer some of the questions that some of the people have.
It does.
Okay, Representative O'Mullery. Okay, Representative Mullery.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could we have an explanation of how this is different from the request in the Jobs Committee?
Representative Atkins.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize. I don't serve on the Jobs Committee, so I don't know what that specific request was. But we do have, with the Chair's permission, we do have Ms. Hartnett who could perhaps distinguish between the two requests. My understanding is they are two separate expenditures.
And welcome. If you could identify yourself for the record. We understand you've visited with all but 4 people, so we all probably know who you are.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Mary Hartnett, and I'm the Executive Director of the Commission of Deaf, Blind, and Hard of Hearing Minnesotans. We're a small agency housed within the Department of Human Services, but we are a separate state agency. And we actually never have had a means of becoming part of the governor's budget, and so we've always had to come directly to the legislature, actually just one other time, to request an increase in funds. And Representative, the request that was before the Jobs Committee, our commission does the policy analysis for education, healthcare, employment, technology. So far this year, we've been in I think 7 or 8 or 9 different committees, and that we were advocating actually with a group of nonprofit organizations and that request was for funds that we'd have hoped that would come from the general fund and the Workforce Development Fund for jobs for youth and jobs for adults. So it's a completely separate topic. This is just funding for our organization. The request for the jobs funding was for monies that would go to the nonprofit organizations that are serving these individuals.
Representative Gunther. Well, that was your question. Okay. Any further questions on the amendment? Seeing none, then all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. We now have. Let's see, what's the A9? We now have the A9 amendment.
Mr. Chair.
Representative Hillstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members, actually the A9 amendment the policy has caused a little more controversy than I was expecting. The bill actually made it through committees without much controversy, but between now and the last committee and now, an amendment was placed into this piece on gold bullion coin dealer regulation, making the policy much more controversial. However, it does have a Commerce Department fiscal note. So I have spoken to Chair Atkins, and I think with the chair's consent, I'd just like to move lines 1.3 and 1.4 of the amendment. I believe I may also need to keep the bill in balance, lines 4.13 to 4.18, and then delete all the policy, as we'll have to fix what ails the bill somewhere else.
Just for clarification on what the amendment needs to be, Representative, Mr. Marks, or we need lines 1.
Mr. Chair, it would be line 1.1 to line 1.5. And then I need the fee, right? And then I need lines 4.13 to 4.18 to keep the bill in balance.
Hmm? 4.18. You said 4.18, Representative Hillstrom?
4.13, Mr. Chair, to 4.18.
Yeah, okay. Everybody have that? Oh, we need one more, okay.
Mr. Chair and members, the language on 4.13 and 4.18 is proposed new language. So to slot that somewhere in statute, I think you still need 2.18 that creates Section 2, coded as 80G.02, registration. And then on 4.13, yeah, you could just eliminate sub D, period 5, period. And the bold registration fee, and then the rest of the language would work. So the amendment for Section 2 would delete everything after 2.18, 2.19 through 2.35, all of page 3, and 4.1 through 4.12 with the changes I just indicated on 4.13.
Representative Hillstrom, did you get the suggestions from staff?
Mr. Chair, yes, I did. I'm hoping that takes care of the issues. Mr. Chair, if that's staff's recommendation, I think I just need to make sure that the funding mechanism for this is proper in the commerce budget, and I have to keep his bill in balance, so I need the fee, and I need lines 1.1. So if staff thinks that's the proper amendment, I'm trying to fix the policy, Mr. Chair, in a policy place.
We're getting a thumbs up. We probably shouldn't go by thumbs up.
Mr. Chair and members, yes, I think the amendment does work as is. I don't think any additional changes are needed.
We had an audit one time at the Board of Regents at the U of M, and they were nodding their heads, and the state auditor said that was probably not an appropriate way to proceed, so we should have it on the tape.
And Mr. Chair, I should clarify, too. I said no additional changes are needed. What I meant to say is that the A9 as Representative Hillstrom moved to amend it with the small technical change from staff. That's I think, all we need.
Okay. So, Representative Hillstrom,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And members, really what this is
we probably should move the amendment at this point then, as you've described it, or as staff has described it. So, Representative Hillstrom.
I would move that, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, then if I could briefly describe it. So, members, what we've been attempting to do is to deal with bullion coin dealers who have been problematic, and we're trying to, not do unburdensome regulation on people who properly are doing bullion coin sales, but we have found that there has been a number of issues that the Attorney General has come upon. And so, while we were moving through the process, it was we were working very closely to come up with agreement. And again, the last round of amendments that were added has made it controversial. So I just really want to keep the funding piece and keep my bill alive. And I promise to work on the policy of the bill with the people who actually sell bullion coins to see if we can't address this issue.
Okay,
And I'd
so
ask
the
your support.
motion is before us. Any discussion? Representative Holberg.
Mr. Chair, if I might, if somebody could talk us through the fiscal impacts, the dollar amount that you have in your amendment relates to the expenditures, but the revenues are more, the best I can tell here. And so does that then put the bill out of balance? Do we drop it to the bottom line? What's the fiscal impact of this amendment?
Representative Hillstrom, or
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Holberg, it was my understanding that we were just raising the amount that we needed to actually fund the program. That has been the intention all along, based on the numbers from Commerce. So we were just trying to raise the fee to regulate these folks for exactly what it was going to cost us to regulate them, and that's it.
Mr. Marks, did you want to comment?
Mr. Chair, the numbers on
Representative Holberg.
expenditures and revenues don't match in the fiscal number.
Mr. Marks.
Mr. Chair and Representative Holberg, it's the $646,000 that's the general fund number under the Commerce Department that we're picking up here. And the amendment on line 1.3 would pick up the 646 in fiscal 14 and the 642 in fiscal 15. And then that's the amount of revenue. Actually, you're correct. There's slightly more revenue being raised than is being spent. It's 20,000 more, 22,000 more. So that would be accumulating to the bottom line.
Representative Holberg, does that answer your question?
Well, is that the author's intent to just drop the excess to the bottom line?
Representative Hillstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If that's the case, that's where it will have to go at this point.
Okay, any further discussion? Representative Dittmer.
Yeah, would banks fall under this legislation if they're providing under these if they're providing precious metals, IRAs, and so forth?
Representative Hillstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, that is what we've been working on the language to make certain that the folks that we are getting is folks who are doing these bullion coin transactions that have more than $5,000 in aggregate sales over a 12-month period. So we've been working very hard to make certain that we really are getting the target, and that's why I'm deleting the majority of the amendment to make sure that we get it right.
Representative Dittmer, you said. Okay, any further discussion? Seeing none, then all those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
Motion carried. Representative Atkins, that's the end of the amendments. Any concluding comments?
No, Mr. Chair, I think we've given it a good, thorough hearing, but I'd be happy to stand for any other questions or concerns that members might have.
We will. Representative Beard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
If I may, on the energy resources section of the bill, it's just a number with no description about what that's about. Representative Atkins or Mr. Chairman, could you enlighten me as to, is that for what we used to call the Energy Reliability Administrator's Office over at Commerce? Is that what that's about?
Mr. Chairman, if I might defer that question. I don't know what it was called before, but I know we do have folks here from the department that may be able to answer that specific question. I just don't know what it was called, if it was called something else.
Mr. Chairman, I'd appreciate just a brief explanation.
And if you could identify yourself for the record.
Mr. Chairman, Peter Brickwoody, Director of Government Affairs for the Department of Commerce, and forgive me, Representative Beard, I just stepped into the hallway long enough to miss your question, so I'm sorry, if you could repeat it.
The energy resources line in the Commerce Department, is that the funding for Mr. Grant's department? We used to call it energy reliability and energy security. I see it's listed as energy resources. Is it the same thing? Is that what that's about now?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Beard, that's correct. What is now called the Division of Energy Resources in the last biennium was previously named the Office of Energy Resources. So it is a change in acronym, but the same group at the Department of Commerce.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. That's what I need to know.
Okay, any further discussion?
Can you, if I might?
Representative Holder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Atkins, I'm sorry if I missed this. The weights and measures, the 30% increase, the reason or need for that?
Madam, Mr. Chair, Representative Holberg, that actually hasn't been adjusted for quite some time, and it's literally just to update things that, and I've got, as long as I've got Mr. Brickwoody, he can get into more detail for you. But it was, we haven't had any objection to it, and it's literally just a update to something that hasn't been changed in a very, very long time.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Holberg, the weights and measures fee increase is designed to place the equipment that we use in the various labs at Weights and Measures and the equipment that goes out into the field, including trucks that we use to get around the state and do inspections on a regular replacement schedule. Much, if not all, of the equipment at Weights and Measures is reaching or is already past the expected life cycle. And so this increase in fees would be paid by the people who use the services at Weights and Measures. And we have thus far received no opposition to this proposal.
Mr. Chair, if I might, can you give us some idea? I'm assuming you charge like gas station owners, et cetera. What would their fee be now, and what will it be going to?
Mr. Chair, Representative Holberg, I could get you the fee schedule from fiscal year 12 if you'd like after committee. But Weights and Measures charges fees in a variety of areas, including our metrology lab, our weights lab, and also for inspections at gas stations. Our fees, depending on the size of the scale, range from anywhere in the $5 to $10 range for small scales at grocery stores. I believe the largest fee at Weights and Measures is charged to railway cars, which we have a railway car that goes around the state, and we use it to help ensure that other railway cars are the largest. I believe that's in the $700 to $800 range currently, and those fees would go up accordingly by 30%.
And if I might, then is this like a dedicated revenue source where all of the new money goes to this department and these operations, or is it used for other things as well?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Holberg, the money that will be raised and is the money that is currently raised by Weights and Measures fees are deposited into the general fund as non-dedicated revenue. The Weights and Measures budget is currently funded through the petroleum inspection fee, and so, and I don't have it off the top of my head, but there is language in this bill that raises that, the portion of that fee that comes to the Department of Commerce for Weights and Measures budget by a corresponding amount equal to the amount that is being raised by the fees. So it's a somewhat convoluted mechanism, but since that's how Weights and Measures is funded, that was the way to do it, which was to raise the fees, have that money flow into the general account, and then have it come back into the department through the petroleum inspection fee.
All right, thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, then we'll just, as we mentioned earlier, lay the bill over, and we'll be including it in the earlier bill that we took up, Representative Mahoney's bill. So we now go to housing, and that's Representative Clark. Okay, Representative Clark, we need to start with a motion. Whenever you're ready.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would move that House File 1344 be recommended to pass, and it will be joined, as I understand, with the Jobs Committee bill, and then Jobs Committee, and move on to the General Register inside that bill.
That's correct. So Representative Clark moves that House File 1344, first engrossment, be recommended to pass and placed on the General Register.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I misstated. It'll be folded in, but we make that motion later. It's just to put it before us.
Right. And there are, Mr. Chairman, I have two amendments, and I don't know if you want me to, I can,
Representative, we're just
No, that's fine.
Representative Clark.
okay, well, I have two amendments, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to put those on to put it in the order that the bill should be in. One of them is just a
You want
technical
to take
amendment
the
to the other.
amendments up before you go through the bill? Is that what
Yes.
you're saying?
First-
I've got a side conversation
Okay.
right here, so you want to take the
I'd like
amendment?
to take the A6 amendment first, Mr. Chair, and I move that.
Okay, the motion is before us, the A6 amendment. If you could explain the amendment?
Mr. Chair, members, one of the things you'll find in this bill is that there's a $22 million increase to our target that went mostly to the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency. However, in the process, as the committee went forward, we were requested to send some of our dollars over to the housing programs in the Department of Human Services. And what you will find is that this amendment continues that process with a couple more programs, Mr. Chair. One of them has to do with the reentry program that was in our bill, but that now has some parts in the this is the reentry after prison for individuals who are part of a pilot program that's been going on since 2008. It's in the DHS bill, so this makes it clear that this joins the dollars in the DHS bill, which I understand right now has something like $300,000. So that'll help them get halfway to their goal of serving the individuals they do. The second part of the amendment deals with providing money for what's called the Healthy Homes Project and childhood lead poisoning projects. That's on lines 1.3 to 1.6. And the amendment that's line 1.8 to 1.20, and starting at 1.13. What I'd like to tell you is that the technical amendment to that is what the A7 amendment is next. But I need to move this one first so then I can add the A7 amendment, Mr. Chair. So I move the A6 amendment, which continues the process of moving some of our dollars over to the Department of Human Services.
Okay, now you want to amend the A6 amendment with the A7 amendment.
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so the A7 amendment does...
It corrects, it's a technical correction. There's a mistake on the other.
So it's just technical.
Yeah, and the reason is because, I don't know if you want the technical reason, but it amends the statute, which is not yet in the bill, so.
So the motion is before us. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. So now the A6 amendment is before us as amended. Okay.
As I mentioned, Mr. Chair, that amendment continues the process of moving some of the programs.
We have to adopt the A6 amendment as
I appreciate that.
amended onto the bill then. Is that?
That's correct, Mr. Chair, so I move the
Any
A6.
discussion on the A6 amendment as amended?
Mr. Chair.
Representative Holberg.
Thank you. And I guess we saw this in the Commerce Bill, too, where there's a transfer to DHS for problem gambling appropriation. And I'm just wondering, why didn't we just change targets in those areas? It's a little unusual to be taking money from one area, and it gets a little hard to track. And I see you're doing this one time, but keeping the base in this department, and I'm just a little confused at the rationale.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Clark.
Representative Holberg, these are all housing committee programs. They're all interrelated in many ways, dealing with homelessness, dealing with long-term homelessness, dealing with emergency homelessness. And they have been divided up in the past between these two agencies. So it is confusing, I know, but bringing them together in this way should work.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on the amendment A6 as amended? Seeing none, then all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, I can quickly go through the bill if you'd like me to, and be glad to answer any questions. As I mentioned earlier, the target for our committee was about $22 million, and the governor had recommended $13 million, so you can tell we were about $9 million over the governor's recommendations. The other thing is that some of these changes will also go into the base, so that we'll start to replace, I guess, some of the serious cuts that have happened to housing in the last decade.
Rep. Clark, just so people know, there were two other amendments in the packet, but they've been withdrawn, so we're done with amendments.
Yes.
At this
Yes,
point.
those are-
So,
thank
go
you,
ahead.
Chair, for clarifying that. So, the bill that's before you starts out with a statement about the appropriations to the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency, and as I mentioned, the appropriations that follow really are the Housing Finance Agency's appropriations. The Challenge Program, which is an economic development and housing program that has some additional priorities added to it. For the major portion of the legislation provides housing for communities and regions that are experiencing job growth and just don't have the housing to deal with that. We add some additional priorities to deal with creating safe and stable housing for homeless youth and trafficked women and girls, and using the land trust mechanism that is a very efficient way to produce housing. And the Housing Trust Fund, which is the fund that provides housing for our very lowest income people, we continue that program at $11 million, but we also make $1 million temporary appropriation for rental assistance for school-age children who have changed school at home at least once in the last school year. This is the governor's initiative. And we have found that children who are moving around and who are homeless and moving around don't do very well in school. So this addresses that. The rest of the housing trust language there has been amended and changed in the amendment we just adopted. We continue with rental assistance for mentally ill. Some of that's called the Bridges Program, $2.6 million each year. Family homeless prevention, $8.043 million each year. Homeowner Assistance Fund. The only new language there, in addition to the funding, is to make sure that we're aimed at closing the disparity gap in affordable home ownership for our low-income American Indian communities of color. Going on to the other appropriations, there's been a reallocation in the rental property assistance fund, and you can follow that hopefully in the spreadsheet. I could go back to that if you want, but basically we're moving around. We get some federal dollars that help us with that program, so we're able to reallocate. Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. Home ownership, education, counseling, and training. That's the programs that help our housing advocates do their work all over our state. And we, again, in this area, put language in to make sure that we're trying to deal with the housing disparities and providing services to those programs that deal with some of the culturally specific groups. That's for home ownership. Capacity building is again, funding for our advocates. The last part of the legislation is the transfers, the grants. I'll do those first. The grants that are new to this bill, which are grants to open access connection, which is it's voicemail for homeless people so that they have a place to receive information either about housing or jobs. The Homeline program, which is a tenant advocacy program that serves about 150,000 people every year. They are given $200,000 each year in this bill. And the East African Women in Minnesota program is a program that deals with trafficked women and children in the East African community. We do have, and deals specifically with shelter for them. But we do have in Minnesota culturally specific shelters for many other parts of our community, but there's nothing that is serving the East African women. And as you probably know, Minnesota is the destination to the largest diaspora of Somali people in the U.S. And so the need for shelters for those women who are in domestic violence situations is part of this bill. And I already mentioned what we're doing with these other transfers, just briefly, I'll just go over that again. We're transferring $900,000 each year for the long-term homeless supportive services. This is a program that was started under Governor Pawlenty, where we built housing throughout the state. The services for that, those programs for the people who are in that housing, is what this addresses, and it's properly over in the Department of Human Services, so we are sending the money there. Transitional housing is another $250,000. Again, that program in Department of Human Services, we are providing that transfer there. The emergency services grant of $250,000 each year is also transferred over for folks who are in emergencies in terms of their homelessness. And then the last two parts deal with $1 million each year, $1.5 million each year to provide housing and services to homeless youth. This is a totally underserved group of people in our state who are homeless. We have the request for serving these folks is really much, much higher. It's estimated to be about $13 million. So we're going to be doing $3 million as a start, members, and we hope that'll make some difference. The last is the $1 million to provide housing and shelters each year. That's $2 million total to trafficked women and children, a growing problem throughout our state for which there are only 4 beds in the whole state of Minnesota. Every night there's 35 to 40 mostly young girls who are being trafficked and they have no place to go. So, Mr. Chairman, that's the bill. It's really a pleasure to work on this bill with people. There's been a very, as I think those of you who might have been in the Capital Investment Committee this morning heard, the folks who are advocates for all the people that we're talking about here have come together in a way that's really unprecedented and helped us figure out a budget that can begin to work. And they have really united. I'm pleased to say that they have, worked with us on these numbers and helped us look at the programs and where they should go. I do want to just say this is far underfunding for what we eventually will need, but it's a good start, Mr. Chairman, and I'm glad to answer any questions the committee might have.
Okay, we do have a question from Representative Mullery.
Thank you.
Representative Mullery, are you on the Commerce Committee?
The Commerce Committee? No,
That's just an aside question. You're not.
No, Mr. Chair.
I think you used to be. Okay, this has nothing to do with the Commerce Committee right now. I just was wondering. Okay, Representative Mullery, your question?
Mr. Chair, I don't get the connection to the Commerce Committee.
I'll explain it to you sometime.
Oh, okay. And Mr. Chair, looking at A6, maybe you know what Chapter 54 of Laws of 2007 was, but on line 1 to 8 to 111 of A6, is that the network that this is referring to? The program?
Mr. Chair, where we're moving it over to is, and Representative Mullery, is the network in the Department of Human Services. What these lines delete that is the more generic language of what was in the Minnesota, in our Housing Finance Agency bill.
Any further questions? Representative Holberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Homeline grant, I think they were at $40,000 a year, or maybe $40,000 a biennium, and almost a 10 times increase here. Can you tell me what more they're going to be doing, or?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Holberg, I think their budget was more like 406 or something. I think that's the number I saw per year. But what they're trying to do is cover more of the state. Right now they are statewide, but they hope to expand and serve, for example, my own city, Minneapolis, does not have a tenant advocacy anymore.
Representative Holberg.
So so you think that the grant was for more, that their current level is more than 80,000 a biennium?
Mr. Chairman, I do have someone here who can verify that. That's what my memory is like. And so this is 200,000 a year. Should I have that person come down? Do you want to clarify? I'm going from memory right now, so if you need that, or I can provide that to you later, Representative Holberg, if you want me to.
Well, Mr. Chair, so you're not expanding their mission at all? You're just expanding their service area, or?
Mr. Chairman, I think that might be a good way to say it. The city of Minneapolis, for example, has no tenant advocacy program anymore. I'm sorry, I can't see you.
Representative Hornstein's big head.
Thank you, Representative Ornstein. So the mission is the same, but yeah, the individuals that would be served would be more. And they have long, people wait on the line sometimes, I'm told, for 15, 20 minutes because they have been short. Their budget has not been all that it needs to be.
All right, thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, Sina, we'll lay the bill over, and now we're going to have a series of motions. So I'd like to bring House File 729 as amended before us. That's the first bill we had up. And then the chair moves that we incorporate the language contained in House File 1682 as amended into House File 729 as a separate article with revised instructions to make technical corrections and adjust the title accordingly. So that motion is before us. Now, I was going to have Representative Mullery make that motion if he was on the committee. That's why I was asking. But Representative Atkins is convening his own committee. He was going to be making that motion. But any discussion? Seeing none, then all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Now, Representative Clark has a motion.
Yeah, move to incorporate the language in House File 1344 as amended into House File 1729 as a separate article with instructions to the reviser to make technical corrections and to adjust the title as needed.
Okay, that motion is before us. Any discussion? Seeing none, then all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. I should point out, being we've acted now on these, that even though they're combined into one bill, their separate targets do remain under the House budget resolution. Okay, Representative Mahoney, do you want to make a motion?
Yes, I'd like to renew my motion that House File 729, the first engrossment, be recommended to pass as amended and be placed in the General Register.
Okay, that motion is before us. Any discussion? Seeing none, then all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion carried. And tomorrow, what time do we meet? Next meeting, 10. Okay, we meet tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, and that's the basement hearing room. And Thursday, April the 11th, we meet at from 12:30 to 2 in room 200. Oh, room 5 tomorrow. Okay. Did I say what? Oh, I see. Where the confusion was, we're in room 5 tomorrow. I'm going to just stay with tomorrow. We're in room 5 tomorrow at 10 o'clock, and then if necessary, we convene at 5:30 in the basement hearing room. But hopefully we'll get done with the bills the first meeting.
Mr. Chair, how long do you plan on meeting in the morning? And then I know there's some question about caucuses meeting tomorrow around the
What meeting?
dinner.
I didn't hear.
First of all, how long are you going in the morning? Do you have a room only for a specific period of time? Are we going like through the afternoon, or what's the end time for tomorrow?
Yeah.
Is the first part of the question.
Yeah, I just double checked, and on our schedule here, we're going to be in from 10 to 11:45. So if we're not done, then we reconvene at 5:30.
Okay, and then was my understanding that Republican-Democrat leadership were trying to work out that there was going to be a joint time tomorrow around dinner for both caucuses to meet?
Yeah.
Is there any update around that?
I don't
Does anybody know the answer to that question? That one's new to me. Yeah.
Okay.
I just don't know the answer to the question, so I suspect we'll all have to check our emails for announcements if that's what's happening.
Mr. Chair, you're referring to the caucus?
Yeah.
I have a note here that the DFL meet tomorrow night, and the Republicans will meet at 5:45.
We're meeting at 5:45.
You're at
We are
5:45?
also at 5:45.
Yeah, so I guess we're all meeting at 5:45.
But your question was...
Not in the same place, no.
No, what my first question was the length of the...
We stopped at 11:45 thereabouts, but your question was that there was supposed to be a joint caucus meeting tomorrow at noon, did you say?
No, I was informed that on Wednesdays around dinner time that the leadership had a discussion and they were setting aside a period of time for both caucuses to caucus, and that tomorrow's Wednesday, the last I checked, right? And you've got a meeting scheduled at 5:30, which appears to be kind of over the dinner hour, and so I'm trying to figure out if there's conflict or how that's all going to work.
I spent a lot of time at my grandmother's house when I was growing up, especially during World War II, and we had dinner at noon. That's what confused me. Now, when I, that's right, and supper was and promptly at 5. So that's where you confused me when you said dinner.
Mr. Chair, dinner at my house is at 5:30.
There apparently are some cultural differences, but I grew up in South Minneapolis. I don't know where. Yeah, we'll just keep you posted about tomorrow. Dinner's at noon. With a bit of luck, if we get done by 11:45, it's a good question. I mean, don't worry. And we are now adjourned.